What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Coast to Coast podcast here on InsideCarolina.com. I'm Joey Powell, and we are brought to you by Johnny T-Shirt. Coast to Coast podcast back at you with a lot to do. You know, we got into our official summer every other week as opposed to the every week rotation we've been doing for you guys during the season. So we took a little time off to recharge, to check and see where we were all going to fall in the NBA draft projections. We talked to some agents, talked to some GMs, really get a feel where we were going to go, and we decided we're just going to come back and do another Coast to Coast. With me, as always, Sherrell, McMillan, Sean Moran. Sean, how you living?
I'm doing really well.
Yeah,
how are you?
I'm good, man. I appreciate you asking. Sherrell rocking the traditional Chicago Bulls colors tonight. Real, how you feeling?
I'm good. Another podcast where I can say I did not expect this to happen. So
yeah, well,
here we go. Here we are.
Let's dig into that. News of the day broke a little earlier today. And look, I'm going to go ahead and say for all of the folks that were on the InsideCarolina.com message boards and on Twitter and just blowing up, is Caleb going to? I'm trying to tell you, Sherrell had it. He told you guys what his intel was telling him. Ben reinforced what intel was telling us. And everybody wanted to kind of poke and prod and not be patient. And look what happened. Caleb Love returning for his junior season in Chapel Hill. Sherrell, I'm going to go to you first. I have loved the videos these guys came out with, but can we just say the Jay-Z Love from the Black Album has to put Caleb's video immediately at the top? Yes?
I was talking to someone. They were like, "Who put that on there for Caleb?" Because in 2004 was how Caleb was 20.
Yeah.
So in 2004 he was not old enough to remember that. So it was like, who did that for him?
Hey, maybe his dad was playing it as his nap time music.
Yeah.
I don't know, but...
So whoever did, salute to them, because us 35 and ups, we love that. So thank you.
Yes, that was quite refreshing to hear that in his announcement today. But Sherrell, do you want to share a little bit about what you have learned about the process for Caleb and what led him back to say that he's going to be back in Chapel Hill to, as the kids say, be the get back gang or run it back?
Yeah, I think he knew what he wanted to do as soon as the title game was over. But all the great coaches, from Coach Smith to Roy Williams and now I'm sure with Hubert, they always tell you to get away from it and don't make an emotional decision. There's the famous story about Sean May telling Roy Williams that he was going to come back, for his senior season. He's like, "What are you doing? You can't do that. You're going to be drafted too high." And so I think, like I said, as soon as the national championship game was over, I think Caleb was like, "I'm coming back because I can't go out like this." But him and his family talked about it, and they gathered feedback, and they talked to Hubert Davis and Pat Sullivan used their contact to talk to folks and just give them the information that they needed to make a good decision. And from everything that we heard, Caleb absolutely would have been drafted. I think that is not in question. It's just whether or not you want to take the chance of not going in the first round or not going in really those top 40 slots. Because, it's not just the first round that's guaranteed anymore. Really, if you're a top 40 pick, I think you'll eventually get some kind of guaranteed contract. Now, it might not always be exactly what you want, but you'll get one. And so there was that. And I think Caleb's motivation the entire time, I don't need to tell you that he's confident and that he believes in himself. That is pretty much obvious. And so he, I believe, wanted to be higher, and he believes he can make himself get picked higher with a good season, improving on some of the things that he's worked on, improving on some of the things that he needs to work on. So I think that was kind of the combination of all of it, and is that, yes, he would have been drafted, but he wanted to come back and make amends. He enjoys playing for this team. He wants to be able to show that he can do more things so he can get drafted higher. And frankly, as will be discussed, when you have a run like UNC did, you reap the rewards through NIL, and that's happening now. So all those were factors.
Sure. I want to stay here real quick before I go to Sean for some analytical discussion. How big is having a guy like Pat Sullivan on the staff now for situations like this, where, it used to be Roy would always pick up his Rolodex, and I'm a firm believer that Roy Williams still used a Rolodex up until 2020, but would call the GMs and the people that he knew in the league. How big is it for UNC to now have a guy like Pat Sullivan, who spent so much time in the NBA, on the staff now to help guys like Caleb Love kind of go through decisions like this?
It's a position that you have to have now, as far as I think his official title is director of recruiting, but he's got that experience as an NBA person. So it's just something that is needed. It's something that was probably a little bit overdue in Chapel Hill, but he probably has a more extensive, hopefully he doesn't have a Rolodex, but a more extensive Google Doc with different GMs and people that he can get information from. In addition to him just knowing the game, being an assistant coach in the NBA for so long. So I'm not going to say invaluable, but really, really valuable. And also, like Hubert Davis said, he is a Carolina guy, so he kind of gets, how things work at UNC. So yeah, very valuable for UNC to have him.
Sean Sherrell touched on it briefly, talking about, Caleb's belief in himself in that he can go from a I'm going to be drafted guy to a first round, even lottery type guy. What things do you think he needs to work on next season to get his game to that next level? Because we've heard Caleb say he wants to work on his own shot selection. I think people on the North Carolina staff would like to see him be more aggressive in going to the basket rather than settling for jumpers that he's proven he can make. In your mind, what are things that he needs to do individually to help himself? And then if you can parse that a little bit, what are some things you think he can do to make the team better next year?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think just the decision, I mean, when we were doing 2 years ago over the summer, the fit articles, everything related to a guard had Caleb Love leaving after his freshman year. And it wasn't so much because, we thought lottery draft pick, but, Scout or 24/7 had put him, had jumped him up the rankings pretty high at the end. And when you sit top 10, you almost feel the pressure to leave no matter what happens. And yeah, there are a lot of players in this class that have done really well already in the pros, but there's also, I feel, guys year in and year out that leave and they might not be ready. And I think, it's always a great argument as to, well, do you get in and improve in the G League or on a two-way, or do you try to go when you're a little more seasoned? And I think this will potentially help him get into that first round, especially because now we're seeing in the second round, even if it's early second round, a lot of those guys are going on two ways rather than contracts. But to answer the two questions from an individual perspective, I think last year we saw how much his three-point shooting improved just from, he finished the year at 36%. He was in the 40s for a good majority of the year, but really more, I mean, one, his range was incredible. Some of the shots how deep he did hit them, the moves that he used to hit them. So I think that was, everybody saw what he worked on last year. I think going into next year individually, you hit on it of attacking the basket and getting really all the way to the basket, which I think we saw in that UCLA game, the second half, which got him going, St. Peter's and even Duke. And to, I know he was attacking at the end of the Kansas game, but I think, his 2-point percentage has really struggled both seasons. And I think in large part the first year and even, his sophomore year, he would go into the lane, maybe wasn't as fully explosive off of 1 foot or falling back or avoiding contact, really taking tough shots. But I think he realized he can get all the way to the rim and finish, against a team's opposing big man. So I'd love to see him continue working on just getting and attacking fully to the basket. He's always been comfortable hitting the pull-up jump shot. I think, continuing to look for those, especially if teams are overplaying him. And then finally, not something I think that he should utilize a whole lot, but continuing to work on kind of that floater and kind of 5 to 10 foot range game. Something he hit in the Duke game. He hadn't really hit it all season. Didn't have it in the Kansas game, but once again, I think that just kind of adds something else to his arsenal. But I think from an offensive perspective, if he can increase that 2-point percentage and reduce the turnovers, I think that will definitely help his draft stock. From a team perspective, I think we saw him definitely mature as the year went on. He was still prone to forcing the issue at times, but I think once again, with the starters and players that they do have returning, there's kind of that extra trust in the teammates. And I think once again, there won't be Brady Manick to help move that ball quick, but I think between him and RJ that they now have a lot more trust and rapport with each other, and just kind of continuing to move the ball quickly and make sure it's a team game while being aggressive and being kind of that alpha dog that they need.
Speaking of trust and rapport, I can feel the rapport that we have built through this podcast, because you're absolutely taking me right where I wanted to go with this follow-up question. No Manic, but four out of the five return. How does this affect UNC's offense next year? Do you still think it's going to be, very much a 4-out, 1 in? Let me rephrase that. It's going to be 4-out, 1 in, because that's what Hubert Davis wants to play. How does that change without having a sniper like Manic at the 4?
Great question. I mean, I think over the summer, the two most important people are, well, actually three, are going to be Puff Johnson, number one. I think as of right now, it's kind of expected that he could step into that role. And once again, he does kind of have that shot, shot from the outside, as well as, a toughness that, a lot of people probably didn't realize going into this season. But once again, that's a huge ask to say, hey, be Brady Manic after this season, who, I think was probably the team MVP, just in terms of having that stretch ability, as well as how well he did play. I was just looking real quickly, so I might have done the quick math wrong, but I think he had 63 threes after the two losses. So starting with that Virginia Tech home game, so 63 threes over that stretch, which is just remarkable in terms of that. So it's going to be a huge loss, but I think Puff, can slot in there, which will be important, which leads me to number 2, going to Leaky Black. I think we all saw the improvement he made both offensively and defensively. I think going into the season, he's obviously going to get the defensive accolades, and he definitely proved that the latter half of the year. But he did prove he can make shots offensively, but we also saw, whether it was UCLA or Duke or Kansas, really play off of him even more than teams had before, of, basically utilizing that man as a safety to either help down low or help somewhere. And once again, having a shooter at the 4 with Puff, that makes it a little more challenging for teams to do. But if he can just improve that offensive ability, a little bit more, I think that can help the team tremendously, as well as making defenses play everybody straight up, and even help him, as from a professional standpoint, in terms of how he's viewed after next year. And then finally, Dontrez Styles, is the third one, once again, because he could be playing that 4 position as well. Hit the big Baylor 3. Didn't shoot it that well, but wasn't shy to get a shot off. So I think those 3 are really the ones that we have to look at in terms of how can the team look with 4 starters returning, but you're missing a huge component in Brady Manic.
How does the lack of Manic on the roster change Caleb's offense? Stay with you, Sean.
Sure. Maybe that usage rate goes even higher a little bit, but at the same time, with everybody else returning, hopefully we'll see kind of a slight reduction in, whether it's Armando, Caleb, or RJ in their playing time. And I think potentially see the offensive rating increase from Caleb's perspective. But if it is a guy that can shoot like Puff, I think it still gives him the open lanes, but he's going to also have to develop that rapport, where I think he had a really good one with Brady, where, we saw it in the Clemson game. And that was you kick it to Brady, you basically think you can run back on defense. So I think, once again, it'll give him probably even more control offensively, but I think it'll be big for him to establish that rapport with that new starter very quickly as well.
Sherrell, we're now looking at a complete 180 from where this team was in middle January, early February of this past season, where you and I did a post game, and we've talked about on here before, after that Pittsburgh game, where we had zero expectations of this team even making the postseason. Well, now, after today's announcement, UNC is, by all accounts, going to be in everybody's top 5, some people's top 3, and even fewer folks' number 1 going into the year. How do you anticipate this staff is going to change or modify how they coach based on those expectations?
Oh, I think they'll coach harder. I think last year there were probably times where they had to be a little gentle. And I think Hubert Davis, I don't want to call it gentle, but he's very positive. And so I think there were times that last year where maybe he didn't light into them in a way that he wanted to, just because, to your point, he's still building a rapport with the team. He's a first year head coach. Things weren't going great for a lot of time, but I think this year, and Joey, we were talking about it offline, Jeff Markman made the point. It's kind of like he can say, okay, March 1st through, the championship game, that's who you are, and that's the standard. And anything less than that, and we're going to have a conversation. So they know what's expected of them. There's no breaking in. There's no learning what each other does. There's none of that. We've been there before. We've been there together, and now we're going to try and do it again. Obviously, it's going to be different. Things aren't going to go the same. There are going to be new challenges, but they all kind of, I think, have a better understanding of each other. And that comes from the Hubert Davis, stopping by his office 3 times a week to talk about something other than basketball, but they have the rapport now. And so now it's just about going out and executing as opposed to kind of building the relationships and building the chemistry and learning a new system all at the same time. They don't have all that anymore.
Yeah, we mentioned it on here too. I mean, it's he's got a test case now, and he's got evidence where he can show, hey, this works, knuckleheads. Like, I don't know what you were before late February, but when calendar turned to March, this is who you guys were. And like you said, they can just point back to March 1 of this year and make everything work.
Yeah, and the other thing too, Joey, like all this underdog stuff, this magical Carolina run as an 8 seed, and the feisty guys from Chapel Hill, that stuff.
Plucky.
Yeah, but yeah, that is done. They are now kind of on, I don't want to say on top of the college basketball world, but a lot more is expected of them than last year. So I am curious to see how they will handle it. The one main curiosity I have, and maybe I shouldn't be wondering about this considering it's Hubert Davis and his energy, is like, how do you get up for next year? How do you get up for Cleveland State on December 11th? How do you get for a game against, no disrespect to Clemson, which means full disrespect to Clemson, but how do you get up for a Clemson game, next February 9th, when you've played in, 2 of the biggest games in school history, and you've done these amazing things, and you're building with 7,000 people that like 18 million people watched. Like, how are you going to be able to channel that and use that in games that, I want to say, ultimately don't matter, but in the grand scheme of things don't matter? So that is my curiosity for this particular team is, are they going to be able, you can't expect them to keep the same level of intensity they had against Duke in the Final Four or Kansas in the national championship game, but is there going to be less variance, I guess is what I'm saying. Are they going to be able to keep themselves at 93% as opposed to going 65% one game and then 112 the next game? Like, can it just be a little more consistent considering, all things considered?
If nothing else, the fan base and Inside Carolina subscribers can go back to losing their minds the first time UNC loses a game they shouldn't lose. I do love that you pointed this out, that it's kind of a concern. How do you go into the season to maintain that energy level? The good news is that Hubert Davis has a full off season now to try to think about that. Last year he was trying to get a team together and really probably couldn't even focus on his own guys until he got to the late fall or got to October. So the good news is for fans and I see folks that you guys can watch a coach now that has some experience and has his whole staff together, that has the blessing of a full off season, that they can work on this while they're recruiting and while they're on vacations or whatever. I want to take a quick second and talk about something that Sherrell kind of got into there for a second. And with this being such a new thing, right? And when I say new thing, I mean the experience that UNC is going to bring back next year. Usually teams that are successful in the NCAA tournament for the longest periods of time have a good amount of upperclassmen on their roster. I haven't done the math, but I know this UNC roster is going to be littered with juniors and seniors next year, and not just juniors and seniors, but juniors and seniors that have now a very good amount of postseason experience, which they didn't have at all going into last season. One of the things we talked about on this show probably 6 or 8 weeks ago was that this team was no longer relevant nationally. Well, that has completely pivoted to now, as we were talking with Sherrell just a second ago, this team is officially going from the hunter to the hunted. And I want to go to you first, Sean. What does it do for building program depth when you have a situation now where all these kids that are coming in, Washington and Nickel and Trimble and Will Shaver, who took his redshirt year this past year, these guys have no expectations on them now. How does that help when you're developing a roster at various positions to be cohesive and to be successful?
I think it helps tremendously because, going back to the middle of the season, I know we were worried about this next year, whether they make the tournament or don't make the tournament this year, and perhaps Caleb and Armando decide to, go leave Chapel Hill, and then you're almost in another rebuild situation. It's been really the last 3 full seasons where the team has not been ranked inside the top 25 for the whole season up until the tournament run. So I think it'll be nice for fans, players, coaches, to have kind of just that notoriety going throughout the season rather than just kind of that 3-week period, and kind of having UNC back in the national limelight of sorts, which obviously with the good comes the bad for any loss, or if they don't play well. But in terms of the freshmen, I think it makes it a lot easier for them. And 2 years ago we saw, even as highly touted as all the guys, Caleb and Dayron and everybody coming in, they struggled tremendously and had a lot on their plate. And now you can have Trimble and Washington if he gets healthy, and Shaver now that he's had a semester in the system. The expectations are less. You can work them in, getting them time off the bench, and hopefully kind of see that improvement little by little. And then for the next season, they're ready to play. I mean, I think Trimble still could potentially have a pretty significant role off the bench this year in terms of his growth, but I think it helps from a program standpoint where it's not kind of a constant churn and you're always just trying to chase for that one single year in focus of chasing kind of a top 25 stature. But now you will have it hopefully throughout the season, and once again you're kind of building that constant and steady culture, as well as kind of the UNC program that can hopefully stay in the national limelight with that year in and year out succession of players.
Sherrell, I want to kind of go the same direction with you, but if you could speak a little more towards what this does for these incoming guys. I think Sean talked about how it's going to help their development and kind of take some of the pressure off of them. But in your mind, you've met these guys and worked with them or followed them and have talked with them back and forth prior to their commitments, during their recruitments, and since they've signed. Does that change anything for them? Do you see this being a big boon for the program and having these guys come in, and do you think they'll adapt accordingly?
Yeah, I think so. All these guys, and I believe them when they say it, because frankly, they're not, the top 10, top 15 type kids right now, but they all talk about wanting to come in, do whatever coach asks, and try to help UNC get back and win a national championship to a T. They've all said that over and over again. And I think their role next year, more than likely, will be to help get the starters and main guys, maybe outside of Trimble, to help get them prepared for games, knowing that, the year after that, as a quick aside, been saying like for the last 3 years, like, man, this is it. They're going to lose a bunch of guys because that's the expectation. And then it doesn't happen. And it's like, okay, there's finality here. There's pressure on this team because this team will not look the same next year. And here we are.
We said the last incarnation of these dudes. You said that. Yeah, we said that. Everybody agreed to that. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So now this core group of Leaky and Armando and RJ and Caleb is going to play like 110 games together, like something like that, by the time next season is over. Maybe not quite 110, but over 100 by the time the season is over. Anyway, the point is that they'll be much more ready to step into roles, as you said, as sophomores, assuming now there's a negative side to that too, in having people come back, is that there's no penalty now if you say, you know what, I'm not getting playing time this first year, I'm out. So that is something to look out for as well. Not saying we've heard anything, but that's just human nature that,
Mhm.
they have that ability now. Anyway, the larger point is that they don't have to contribute right away, to your point, which helps build culture. And then you have Armando and Caleb and RJ and Leaky teaching them about, okay, this is how things are done at UNC, and on and on and on. And that kind of got lost really after, I think, Luke May, Cam Johnson, and Kenny Williams left. Until now, they kind of lost that, where the leaders from before were teaching the young guys, and the young staying around, and then they were teaching the new young guys. So it's a positive for Hubert Davis. It is definitely foundational is the word that people have been using for what he hopes UNC will be moving forward.
I can't help but go back to his introductory press conference when he said, I want guys who are going to unpack their bags. And damn if he hasn't done it in one season, right? And people outside the program, other fan bases, people that are trying to tweet through their feelings on Twitter, whatever, they can cast aspersions all they'd like to, but by the same token, Hubert Davis is, to your point, Sherrell, building a program and doing foundational things now, with having these guys want to come back and make another run at things and be more involved in the longer term of the program. It's nuts to see, considering what we were thinking going into this year and then most of this season. Go ahead.
And now, to Sean's point again, there doesn't need to be a quote unquote rebuilding year the way things have worked out. That was what we thought this year was going to be, or this upcoming year was going to be, because we all kind of thought that Armando and Caleb and Leaky would be gone. And so that was going to be the rebuilding. And then it's like, oh, well, after year 2 with this freshman class and adding some guys in 2023, then they'll, be closer to back. But now it seems like you kind of have I don't want to say seamless transition, but you'll have carryovers from this championship run and guys who play a lot next year coming back in 2 years, along with an infusion of talent, plus the guys who are freshmen this upcoming year will be more mature. So you can kind of see now, okay, they've got a chance to put 2 or 3, 4 good years together. Even with some unexpected losses, they still have that chance. So it's like you said, it's crazy where we are compared to where we thought things were 2 months ago.
It's so much positivity. I don't think Tar Heel fans can stand what this last 60 days have been like, but I'm sure they'll get used to it. Something else that really strikes me as positive are the deals at Johnny T-shirt. I mean, when you think about like seeing these videos of players returning, you see the Carolina blue, you see the logo, you see the Argyle, you think, man, I need to go get one of these guys' jerseys. How can I do that? Well, thanks to our friends at Johnny T-shirt, you can actually get jerseys of a guy like Caleb Love, and he'll get to reap the rewards. That's right. Johnny T-shirt has started to get into the NIL name, image, and likeness game, and they have some of these shirts that you can purchase and actually help some of the players and allow some of those players to profit off of their own likeness. So if you're excited that some of these kids are coming back to school, go to Johnny T-shirt, johnnytshirt.com, right there on East Franklin Street. Get your gear. Hit them up. Use the extra 10% off that you get as a premium Inside Carolina subscriber off top of their already amazing prices. Shirts, hats, scarves. If you're a soccer or non-American football fan, they got the scarves there. Whatever you want, Johnny T-shirt is the place for it. Go to Johnny T, hit them up, johnnytshirt.com. We love them. We're very thankful that they sponsor this show and all Inside Carolina content. We hope you will check them out because they're just great folks. And we know great folks listen to this show. Great folks like to be around great folks. Go to Johnny T-shirt. We appreciate them. Take a quick break. Let some of the national guys come in here, pay their bills, all that good stuff. All right, we're back on the Coast to Coast podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, it is officially that time. You've come to wait for this. You're expecting it. That is the GG Jackson recruitment update sound that we're about to talk about GG Jackson, which I know just warms Sherrell's heart, but I'm going to let Sherrell stay in his corner for a second because I want to go to Sean first. Sean, you got a chance this past weekend to watch a lot of GG Jackson film. Specifically, there was a lot going on with the EYBL games. There was the Adidas circuit, I believe, was in Spartanburg. Shout out to people that love Adidas's trash uniforms. But there was a lot of ball being played in the AAU circuit this weekend. Sean, you got to watch a lot of it. Tell us what you saw from GG and how you feel his game is continuing to evolve. And again, I want to reset for everybody. We've talked about the CP3 team that he plays for just doesn't run through him. They've got two amazing guards. GG is a third option if you want to look at it that way, which is insane for a kid that some people think could be the number one overall player in the 23 class. With that said, Sean, take it away, my man.
Well, definitely didn't get to watch as much as I would have liked, but was able to kind of peek in throughout the various Friday and Saturday games that he did have. And I think, you can look at the stats and he averaged 9 shots a game, which to your point, Joey, the team CP3 runs through its guards. And even, through those games, there was a decent amount of time where he didn't touch the ball on offensive possessions, or if he did touch it, it was, a few dribbles on the perimeter and give it back to the guards, and you're not going to touch it again. But I think what you did see, I mean, he dominated on the boards. Every game was double figures in rebounds, and that was something just from his high school. Obviously, different competition, but you can kind of see the tenacity that he does have on the offensive boards. And is he going to replace what Armando is doing from day one? Certainly not. But I think you do like to see that act already, especially at a high level like the EYBL. He did knock in a few threes. Had a kind of a few fadeaways, some to the basket. So he was kind of doing going to his strengths. But once again, I think what we've talked about, shooting is going to be the biggest focus for him. And he has a quick release, he has range, so he's comfortable from that. So it's nice to see him a few, especially when he was only getting 1 or 2 per game. So it's a little tighter in EYBL than the high school scene. But overall, I thought it was a strong weekend for him. And I think, once again, it's now been 2 17 and under weekends that he's played in. And I think overall, I think he showed a little bit in terms of the areas of improvement for when he does get to college. And he showed, what he's comfortable at running the floor and rebounding. So overall, it was a strong weekend for him, but still a ways to go, especially when you're not kind of the go-to guy, which normally you kind of expect a top 10 prospect to be that go-to guy on the AAU team. It just shows he can play in different styles.
Sherrell, this would not be a GG Jackson recruiting update without having you refresh us with the information that you have, which may be static or may not have changed. I know Jeff Borzello tweeted what Inside Carolina has felt for some time, that GG Jackson would be committing sometime in the next week. Anything new there, or do you want to just share this so people stop texting you on the 24/7?
Nothing new, I would say. Commitment is imminent. The correct use of imminent this time, Joey. I know we've used it over the years, and it's just a matter of him setting a date. He told us 2 weeks ago, he told us it was going to be last week, and this weekend, he told reporters at EYBL that it would 100% be this week. And it seems to be that actually is going to take place. I'm hesitating a little bit because we just don't know for sure, but it seems like there's more of a plan in place than there had been previously. So if he does announce the date to commit, obviously we will cover that and be down there. And if it goes the way that UNC hopes, then I'm sure we will do an emergency commitment podcast if that were to happen. Again, the schools that he kind of has narrowed it down to, he had an official list of 6 at one point: Duke, Auburn, UNC, Georgetown, I guess South Carolina, and then the G League. So G League is not really a school, but that was kind of the final list. And everything we've heard, he has never taken a visit to Auburn. The Georgetown situation, I think, isn't one in which he would want to walk into at this point. South Carolina obviously was very heavy in there when Frank Martin was the head coach, but he's since gone to UMass. And then Duke, I haven't heard as much about Duke lately. So if you had to guess, it would be between Duke, South Carolina, and North Carolina.
All right. Well, for everybody who hears this and wants to think other things or whatever, my man said what my man said. You know, Sherrell's record I think speaks for itself, as does Inside Carolina's. Sean, Sherrell, I'll go for you first. Zayden High, a guy that came in hot and heavy on the radar just a couple of weeks ago. Do we feel like anything has changed there?
He didn't play as well, or I should say shoot as well, in Indianapolis, because the bit I was able to watch, or the games I was able to watch, he still was making really good basketball plays, I thought. And there was a bit of, you can tell the confidence he has as well, because at one point his team JL3, John Lucas 3 from Texas, I forget who they were playing, but they were up by maybe 3 with about 40 seconds left, I think it was, Sean, maybe 50 seconds. We were kind of watching the game at the same time. And at that point, I believe he was 4 of 17 from the field. So not a great shooting performance, but they ran a play for him. He had a 3 from the corner, or excuse me, a 3 from the wing, and he knocked it down. And I texted Sean and said he took shot number 18 with the same confidence that he took shot number 1. So that tells you that the kid, in spite of maybe not performing as well this past weekend, still really believes himself, and that's important. And, again, you just don't find guys who even have some shooting ability like his at 6'10" often. So we'll see if North Carolina chooses to offer. He is a big in 2023. It's good. I think they got to see him a second weekend as opposed to just the one weekend in Orlando.
Sean, anything you want to add in about Zayden High? I mean, are they going to beat? Is Zayden High going to beat Bayside this year or no? Just what else do you want to add about?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sherrell hit on it. Was able to catch pieces of his games throughout the weekend. I think he played pretty well on Sunday, which I did not see just looking at stats. But when watching him, he did seem fairly content to hang outside the 3-point line from an offensive perspective. Not that there's anything wrong with that, as we saw last year. He looked like a guy that will probably spend a few years in college, which once again is probably what a college team would like. Rather than, unless they are going to be impact player, one and done type guy. But I think he came in week 1, set the world on fire, got a lot of attention. It's hard to kind of play at that level 2 weeks in a row. But he did hit some big shots when he had the chance, and finished up strong on Sunday. So it'll be interesting to see how the UNC staff approaches him going forward.
Sherrell, before we get to kind of some final tidbits on who UNC's coaching staff watched this weekend, hey, huge shout out to the Syndicate, which, if they're not the best AAU team name that's out there right now, they were a phenomenal hip hop album produced by Swiss Beats in 1999. But Sherrell and I always have these offline jokes about names for these teams, and in one of his write-ups for Inside Carolina this past weekend, which, if you're curious, whenever I see covers these things, they do a great job of giving updates from Travis and Eric Bossy and actual Inside Carolina correspondents that are on site there. Sherrell dropped a note in there about the Syndicate. I had to actually just reach out to him directly because it blows my mind at some of these team names. All right, I'll stop being old and you guys can come back on my lawn now. Sherrell, who else did the staff watch this past weekend of note, and why is it noteworthy?
So not a UNC staff note, just to be clear, but the Syndicate has a player named Aiden Sherrell. So obviously they're my favorite team.
Family.
They have a player named Sherrell. Yeah, and their name is the Syndicate. See, I think Mission Impossible when I think the Syndicate. But anyway,
do they know? Let me ask you: Does anybody on the Syndicate know anything about Bruce and Mickey's?
No, they do not. No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Go ahead, please.
So the UNC staff, I think they were at 3 different events this weekend, which for the first live period. So for those who don't know, and if you're listening to this, you probably do know, real quick. So the 3 main circuits are Under Armour, Adidas, and Nike. The shoe companies have their own circuits that they finance and everything, and there's teams, and they have leagues, and they play games. So they typically do them during the live period so that coaches can come watch their guys. So the first one, UNC stayed at Nike all 3 days. You get basically a 48-hour window to watch games, and UNC was at Nike the whole time because that's where the majority of their targets are. This time they had one assistant, Brad Frederick, who went to Under Armour for I think like a night or two, maybe, just to watch a couple of guys and at least put eyes on some of the Under Armour kids. That right now is probably the third circuit as far as talent. Jeff Lebo, assistant coach Jeff Lebo, was in Spartanburg, I think, the whole weekend. And there are a few guys that he watched from a UNC perspective, but I think the biggest is Paul McNeil, who plays for Garner Road in 2024. If you're thinking about potential offer candidates, he's probably high on the list. And then Sean May and Hubert Davis, I think, spent all their time at EYBL, and Frederick eventually went to EYBL as well, because that's where, again, Gigi Jackson is there, Simeon Wilcher, their 2023 commit, as well as their two 2024 offers, Jaron Stevenson and Cam Scott. So a lot of just making sure that they're looking at their guys and offered players. But then there are other players as well that you can see in the thread on the premium board who they talk to, or who maybe they're starting to pay a little more attention to. And there's some trends that we'll hopefully share over the next week or so that we've noticed, specifically with one position for a particular class. So we'll have that out hopefully later this week.
All right, appreciate you previewing that. But again, I can't stress enough, if you guys want to find out what's going on these showcase weekends, there's always a thread at the top of the Inside Carolina Premium Basketball boards where you get updates, almost hourly from IC's folks who were there. Sean, you got a chance to watch a little bit of the CP3 versus New York Rens game, which featured Simeon Wilcher. Any thoughts there about how that game went for Wilcher?
Well, first, it was great following that thread over the weekend because, I was trying to juggle a variety of things. So was checking in the live stream when I can, but when I was on my phone, just was refreshing the thread, and there was numerous posters that were watching other games and posting updates and things of that nature. So it almost felt like I was there, which was great to read. In terms of that game, it was Wilcher's first AAU game back, I believe, since Sherrell saw him in Orlando when he was injured. And there was some good moments. I think he finished with six or seven assists. You could see kind of just that the quickness he does have when making decisions and hitting the bigs or other wings in scoring position. Struggled shooting the ball in both games. He did attack the basket, especially in that CP3 game a few times that were pretty nice, but overall it was kind of a rough return for him. But I don't think anything to worry about. It's always hard coming back from an ankle injury, especially when you miss. If he was 100%, he would have played those 4 full games. But I think you could definitely see the height that he does have, towering over a lot of the other guards when he was there this weekend. And once again, coming from where he did play high school, NJ.com's player of the year, I don't think there's anything too much to worry about right now with just two subpar games coming off an injury. But I think it'll be good to track how he does in the May EYBL events, which are not open to coaches, but then kind of going into once again the July live periods where everybody will be back.
And Joey, let me jump in. That was the last chance, to Sean's point. That's the last chance for coaches to see guys play until the scholastic evaluation periods, which means they're playing with their high schools in mid to late June. There are 2 of those in June. So anything that the coaches see is going to be via live stream or via live stream pretty much is their only option, or tape or something like that. So that's why it was important in April for these guys to kind of show what they have, because they're not going to get another offer or a chance to show what they can do directly in front of the coaches, where the coaches can kind of see every little piece of the game, and they're not looking on their screen trying to figure out where the camera's going, where they're actually in it. There's no chance for that for another 2 months. So really important.
And I think Sherrell mentioned this after the Orlando EYBL, but just with that March run, kind of UNC just once again back in the national limelight and kind of almost with a swagger to it, like they did win the championship. And when watching that the Ren CP3 game, you saw Wilcher's dad, who is a very vocal guy, but he was manning the sidelines in a big camo, North Carolina gear. And I think, right now, it's cool to rep Carolina stuff again after, maybe years they weren't in kind of that top, echelon from a brand perspective. But I think with what they did this year, as well as even, with Wilcher in the fold and focusing on Gigi, they definitely kind of seem to have that swagger back, just in general.
Clearly, Simeon Wilcher's dad has been listening to this show and hitting up Johnny T-shirt. Clearly. Like, I can't see how there would be any other way he would have such fresh threads on the sidelines of his son's game. Sherrell, and last thing before we close up shop, tell our listeners why New York Rens are an important program and why North Carolina fans should know about New York Renaissance.
If I'm thinking correctly, it's because it's also the team of RJ Davis.
That's right.
North Carolina, Hubert Davis actually watched him going back. Okay, so going back, it was April of 2019, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Avengers Endgame. No, Avengers.
I love that you build it around Avengers movie releases.
Yeah, was it Endgame? Anyway, it was one of the two, and that was like my little tradition that after the Saturday night of EYBL, I would go see whatever the new Avengers or Marvel movie was. Anyway, the point is that Hubert Davis was there in Atlanta that weekend, and RJ Davis was playing RJ, who eventually, went overseas and then got drafted first round. And Davis hit like 8 threes. RJ Davis hit like 8 threes,
mm-hmm.
and Hubert Davis saw it. And that was the genesis of his UNC recruitment. And so it's nice that they kind of have a now, here we are,
mm-hmm.
Hubert Davis and RJ Davis now running it back with, probably a preseason top 5 team. So that is why you should know the New York Rens, is because that is the AAU team of RJ Davis.
And another one in the pipeline on the way to UNC. All right, guys. Have I missed anything? Is there anything that we need to hit before we get out of here, Sean?
No, I think we're good. I mean, the only other thing is, I think you look at some of the guys that didn't play a lot, from a Walton to a Dunn to a Styles, and I think in a lot of other programs you probably would have seen them transfer out. And I think, it really speaks to what Hubert has built, over this past year, for them to want to stay and be a part of the team, especially with everybody now that we know is coming back. So it'll be exciting this summer, much more exciting than probably the past few ones we've had, just to talk about the team. So looking forward to dissecting them, as we go.
Sherrell, anything you want to leave before we hit the road tonight?
Yeah, I would just say, the transfer portal doesn't officially close until May. So we think we have a good beat on how things are going to turn out, but stranger things have happened. So I don't want to lock in the roster until May 1st. This is not inside knowledge or anything. This is just, sometimes life happens, stuff happens, and unexpectedly, things happen. So May 1st, after first, lock in the roster. You can talk about it and you can go to town. But I'm just kind of waiting until May to do that. And the other thing, I wanted to give a shout out to Taylor Bergfeld. He helped us out a ton this weekend, was up at EYBL Indianapolis, helping to send updates and everything. So Taylor, thank you very much. Shout out.
Absolutely. Good stuff. And want to make sure that Taylor gets his due propers from this group to the listeners of this show and viewers of this show. If you're watching this on YouTube, hey, look, I've said it before recently. If you are not subscribed to Inside Carolina's podcast, I'm going to tell you, like my grandma used to say, you a fool. And she wouldn't say that a lot, but if you did something dumb, you would get the FOOL dropped on you real quick. So make sure you don't upset my late grandma and don't disturb her spirit by being a fool and not being subscribed to Inside Carolina's podcast. Man, for the sake of all that which is sacred, subscribe, rate, review us. We appreciate it. As always, thanks for being here. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt for sponsoring. Shout out to John Siegley for producing. But for Sherrell McMillan and for Sean Moran and everybody else at the Inside Carolina family, I'm Joey Powell. We will talk at you sometime in the very near future. Late.